This presentation is called Even Bearing Gifts, the Contribution of Distance Learning Strategies to the Brick-and-Mortar Classroom. This presentation was made at the Society of Biblical Literature annual meeting in New Orleans in 2009. And I told the group at that time there was an element of preaching to the choir, insofar as I was offering this paper to a room mostly of online educators. Whereas this presentation itself actually arises from my experiences in introducing online and asynchronous learning activities to teachers in higher ed who are not familiar with distance learning. Online asynchronous and collaborative applications, that is, elements of Web 2.0, have by now been long valued for the possibilities they allow for distance learning. At the same time, these strategies are still presumed by many educators to be only next best. Some of my colleagues will still ask whether distance learning can recreate the kinds of communities associated with traditional brick-and-mortar learning. This presentation argues that a better question than can they is should they? Web 2.0 is an environment in which teaching and learning is already happening in ways that demonstrate some particular advantages over traditional learning communities. By now, we are no longer seeking simply to export traditional learning community models into the online environment. Rather, many are importing the emergent possibilities of Web 2.0, first appreciated for distance learning, into the brick-and-mortar classroom. By now, the question begins to be asked, can traditional classrooms emulate the kinds of communities taking shape in distance learning environments? In this presentation, I name some of the gifts that distance learning offers to traditional face-to-face learning. I also showcase a sampling of tools and applications that might well be associated with distance learning, but which I have found also to show unique promise in the brick-and-mortar classroom. The examples are from my classes in progress, especially Introduction to the Old Testament. At any given time, a cursory glance at the studies demonstrates that distance learning has been, and remains, primarily about the learning, and only concomitantly about the distance. So, for example, one finds a study that asynchronous online as well as synchronous traditional learning can both produce strong social bonds and on-topic discussion. Another study demonstrating that both synchronous and asynchronous learning have their own respective advantages, to which I will return. Another study concerning large enrollment online courses finds that even these will work well if certain conditions are met. For example, if there is a shift from a teacher focus, that is, what do I require as a professor in order to teach, to a learner focus, what will the students require in order to learn and understand this material? Secondly, if instructors will build trust and personalize the course. And thirdly, if deadlines and timeframes will be clearly established. Note that these are all goals also sought by the most successful educators in the brick-and-mortar classroom. For me, the point of such studies is that as distance learning rises to the challenges peculiar to its formats, its solutions are only secondarily technical and primarily involve reflections on learning that are applicable to all learning environments, including the traditional brick-and-mortar classroom. For my part, I find that I summarize the gifts of distance learning to traditional learning into three chunks: the gift of collaboration, the gift of asynchrony, and the gift of what I call diffusion. So to begin, the gift of collaboration. Traditional teaching, especially of introductory or survey courses, like Introduction to Old Testament or Introduction to Biblical Hebrew, follows a distribution model. In this distribution model, the instructor broadcasts information, developing individual communicating relationships with the several students. experience has shown that the distribution model is simply harder to sustain online. Mary Hess of Luther Seminary put it well. In online interaction, we lack much of the body language, inflection, and instant feedback on which the distribution model depends for real-time correction and reinforcement. So, in online learning, we instead set up a space in which to facilitate collaborative and constructive assignments. Face-to-face instruction has not been blind to the value of such collaboration and constructivist learning, but a traditional 3 or 4 credit hour course offers only limited time for such activity, especially insofar as time must be afforded to lecture. We're simply short on time to build the multiple relations reflected in this graph of a collaborative learning environment. As the benefits of collaboration and constructive learning become ever more evident, teachers of brick-and-mortar courses naturally look for ways in which the tools of online learning, such as wikis, blogging with comments, and so on, might be incorporated into traditional syllabi. Of course, even in distance learning, we do find that the distribution model can't and shouldn't be escaped altogether. For example, we still have to communicate expert knowledge in our subject matter, and we still have to give detailed instructions for complex assignments. Exegetical papers would be a good example. These challenges drive us to find ever more foolproof means of broadcasting such content clearly. Insofar as these solutions lead to greater clarity and efficiency in the distribution of knowledge at a distance, how much more will the brick-and-mortar educator want to avail herself of these possibilities, rescuing precious classroom minutes from unidirectional lecturing and from lengthy and repeated explanations about assignments. Finally, the necessarily strong emphasis that distance learning puts on collaboration through wikis, public writing like blogs, bulletin board discussions, peer review of written work. This emphasis on collaboration provides a worthwhile ethic to communicate also in the face-to-face classroom, more supportive mutual bootstrapping among the students, and less sense of competition and secrecy. As I like to tell my students, a rising tide lifts all boats. Besides collaboration, there is the second gift of asynchrony. As many of us have discovered, asynchrony presents its challenges particularly in the distribution of knowledge model, the passing on of expert knowledge as in lectures, and in the giving of detailed instructions for complex assignments. It's hard to do this asynchronously. Where synchronous time is built into an online course, many educators will still reserve large chunks of that synchronous time to accomplish these tasks, allowing for the real-time back and forth for questions of clarification, basically emulating the traditional physical classroom. But where synchrony is not possible or not ideal, as with typed-in chat rooms, for example, distance teachers have found new solutions and have improved upon old ones for the broadcasting of information. Podcasting, for example, allows lecturing to take place asynchronously. Most teachers in a traditional classroom know what it's like to watch about 1/3 of the students begin to fade out before the lecture is complete. They're not learning anymore, and yet we have no choice but to press on and complete the hour. But students who view lectures asynchronously are at liberty to do what they've always wanted to do. Pause me in order to stretch, to get a sandwich, or simply to pick it up the next day. They may also pause to consult the textbook, to do web searches, or to take notes at their leisure. This is the way students already manage reading assignments, that is, stopping and pausing whenever they want to. And the extension, through podcasting, of asynchrony to the brick-and-mortar lecture seems natural and overdue. Besides lecturing, I said that there's the giving of detailed instructions for complex assignments. In accomplishing this, many distance teachers have discovered the value of rubrics. Rubrics have been around for a long time, but I've observed that distance teachers have been quicker to adopt rubrics and to urge them on their colleagues. So in this sample rubric, you can see the left column lists the elements of the assignment: meeting the deadline, quality of work, writing mechanics, and each box gives a description of what it means to accomplish that element of the assignment excellently, that is more than good enough, acceptably, that is good enough, or poorly, that is in a way that is not good enough. Rubrics, I point out parenthetically, are learner-focused in that they go beyond the giving of directions by also describing levels of performance for the learner. An added benefit of rubrics is that students can use them not only as a guide to their own coursework, but as a guide to assessing their peers' work. For example, in commenting to one another's blog posts, rubrics help the student become appropriately critical, going beyond emotive or aesthetic feedback. I liked it, it was good. I didn't like it, it wasn't good. Rubrics also allow for manageable informed peer review of large written assignments like research papers. Studies and experience suggest that students retain information better if it comes from a peer than if it comes from lecturing or reading. And rubrics provide the students opportunity to do their assignment in a way that they understand what the requirements are, and to assess one another's works by that shared rubric. Traditional educators have the greatest reservations about asynchrony in the area of group discussion. How can we have discussions if the students aren't all in the same place at the same time? But the use of asynchronous discussion, a mode of discussion largely absent in traditional brick-and-mortar learning, yields natural benefits that are already well known to distance educators. For example, students can assess a discussion in progress before they contribute, taking time to reflect, or to do some fact-checking or some research before they contribute. Students who more acutely feel pressure in face-to-face situations, this may include students for whom English is a second language, shy students, students whose educational background largely lacks discussion, students who are accustomed to being marginalized in face-to-face discussion. All of these students may find in asynchrony opportunities to shine that have traditionally been less available to them. For another thing, asynchronous discussion leaves a record of itself. The discussion can be referred to later, cited, or be available for a post-mortem assessment. These benefits make clear that asynchrony is not simply some unavoidable condition with which educators must cope in the distance learning environment. To the contrary, the gift of asynchrony offers the brick-and-mortar classroom specific possibilities for more balanced learning in both the distributive and collaborative modes. After collaboration and asynchrony, there's the third gift of what I call diffusion. In traditional brick-and-mortar teaching, everything is oriented towards that 3 or 4 hours in the classroom. All the learning seems to be locked into that environment. Certainly all the student performance. The reading and writing outside of class we call preparing for class, suggesting that reading and writing outside of class is not so much of value for its own sake, but only for how it allows one to perform during those few face-to-face hours. As we know too well, students tend to lump their preparation into marathon sessions the night before or the morning of that all-important class session. In distance courses, by contrast, much of the distinction between written work and discussion is relaxed and blurred, and students become accustomed to writing briefly and regularly on the subject matter throughout the week, opening the box and spreading their engagement with the subject matter out over time. Many brick-and-mortar courses already include regular short written assignments over the course of the term. The best educators do this in order to get early feedback on early stuff to look at in order to provide feedback to the students before the end of the term has arrived and it's too late to make a difference. If one is doing these short written assignments regularly through the term, then assigning these as interactive online assignments scattered over the week forces the student to sustain a running engagement with the subject matter. So for example, if we meet on Mondays, we may have the students blog on the current lecture and readings by Thursday evening, and then comment on one another's efforts by Saturday or Sunday. Students on Twitter may say tweets on the subject matter from their classmates at random intervals, and those on Facebook will have opportunity for informal check-in as part of their regular social interaction. Also at unpredictable intervals might come notification that some classmate has bookmarked a web article touching on some aspect of our coursework. Many of us educators and researchers already know that warm feeling of percolation when some subject matter is always at the edge of our mind, making unpredictable connections with the rest of our thinking and living. This percolation, this simmering, this diffusion is, in my view, one of the great gifts of distance learning tools to the brick-and-mortar classroom. Students simply have a better chance of staying warm on the material instead of getting cold between sessions, such that we all enjoy a more productive, ongoing engagement with the material. Now we come to the yes, but how about the technology? When I explain to colleagues the things that I'm doing, I always start, as I have here, with pedagogy. What are some of the challenges all educators face, and what kinds of solutions might we imagine? Only then do I bring in the tools I'm currently trying, adding that my collection of tools is idiosyncratic. Other teachers use other tools, and I will certainly be trading in some of my current tools for other solutions down the line. That said, here's a look at the tools I'm using now and how they are solving problems for me in the brick-and-mortar classroom. Podcast lectures. This is actually where it began for me. In my traditional section of Introduction to the Old Testament, I was already recording lectures as I gave them so students could review them after the fact. That is, I recorded my lectures while I gave them in class so students could see them, hear them again later. I eventually decided that I wanted to free up that session time altogether, and so I began to pre-record the lectures instead and to assign them as part of the students' homework alongside of the readings as part of their preparation for class. Voice alone can be plenty, but for my part I like to enhance a podcast with slides. For instance, offering visual cues for points of contact to other episodes, attribution, where in my lecture I rely on other scholars, clickable links to web pages or Google searches, or just the kinds of drawings I would normally do on the chalkboard or whiteboard. My preference has been to leave open the hour of class time that I used to spend on lecture and to use it instead for questions and answers on the lecture that they've seen at home, or following whatever appropriate rabbit trails arise from student questions. In this way, not only do I feel for the first time that teaching Introduction to the Old Testament, that our session period is roomy enough for spontaneous exploration, but that hour becomes one of which the students take considerable ownership, deciding on its course, a real rarity in an information-packed introductory course. Another tool I like to use is the Wiki. For my part, I set up our Wiki at the public website WebPaint, which I find more flexible than the wikis in a course management system. Students must make at least one substantial contribution to the Wiki each week. They don't mind because they find shortly that in effect they are making their own study guide for the examinations. This becomes an opportunity for first-year students to begin to find varying opportunities for leadership, for taking ownership of special areas in the subject matter, and for showing off. So ultimately, for our Introduction to Old Testament course, this wiki will include pages, collections of pages on the prophets, the Torah, the writings, and so on. Particular pages that they add, such as tools here, histories, maps, outlines, and timelines, and whatever they think will help to will help the wiki to serve as a study guide on the material. I'm often surprised by the choices of direction they take. So for instance, I see they've added a section called Fun Stuff. And I'm pleasantly surprised also that student ownership of collaborative space need not amount to the lunatics taking over the asylum. The content of the wiki suggests to me that Kevin Kelly, as quoted by Michael Wesch, is right in saying that everybody is smarter than anybody. Blogging and commenting on blogs. As with the wiki, I've preferred to move blogging out of the course management system and into spaces of the student's choice, such as WordPress or Blogspot. By creating their own spaces, students are empowered to take ownership of their content. For example, some students do their course blogging in a space where they already blog on other topics. Right? So here, a student who blogs on baseball and on Jesus is, for my course, blogging here on the patriarchs. And because commenting to one another is a required activity, beginning bloggers enjoy a captive audience on whom to practice. Optional for my students is the social bookmarking of web pages, such as at sites like Diigo. Through Diigo and other social bookmarking sites, students can socially bookmark, highlight, and comment on web articles of their choice, feeding their bookmarks into our group library. So our class, Introduction to the Old Testament, has a group on Diigo. And when students bookmark a web page of interest, they can bookmark it to this group, and then the bookmark is fed into this central list so that we can all see what one another are bookmarking. Also optional is twittering on the course and on our subject matter. But how do we manage all this far-flung content if students are blogging over here and over here, if the wiki is over here and Twitter and such? At this point, I have mostly reverse engineered some of the solutions found by Michael Wesch, cultural anthropologist at Kansas City University, whose course site can be found in the links that I'll provide at the end of this presentation. One such tool is Yahoo Pipes. Their slogan is Rewire the Web. Basically what Yahoo Pipes allow me to do is to collect RSS feeds from each of the students' blogs. So I have all of their blogs in the box there at the upper left. And then these go through the pipe to the filter. And there I've created a filter that selects for a tag I ask them to use when they blog on our course content. Here it's GETS 11500. So if they write a blog that concerns our course, they add this tag to the blog, and this filter selects for only those posts. In this way, we collect only their course-related posts, while at their own blog site, they're free to blog also about cats or baseball or anything they want, alongside of their course blogging. Their space belongs to them, and we're simply selecting out the material that's related to our course. And that all goes into a single feed that comes out of our Yahoo pipe. This is our Netvibes page, and this is where it all comes together. Netvibes is my favorite aggregating page, bringing all of the stuff that they're doing for our course to a single grand central station. So RSS feeds from all of our tools come here. In the left-hand column, these are where the different groups of students, where the Yahoo pipes are spitting out their blog entries. In the center, when they work on the wiki, here's a box of updates to the wiki telling us who's making what updates and listing those pages that have been updated. In the upper right are social bookmarks coming from the Diigo page, and in the lower right, any tweets that are being twittered on our course. This means that students don't have to chase around all over the web to see what one another are doing. Quite the opposite. In between our class sessions at any time, students need only glance at our Netvibes page to find that at unpredictable intervals a student has blogged or commented on their blog, has contributed to a wiki page of mutual interest, has socially bookmarked a course-related web article, or tooted a tweet. As Wesh puts it, we are teaching the machine, that is the internet, to bring the information to us, wherever and however we have structured the learning environment in which the information finds us. It doesn't matter whether it's an online course or a brick-and-mortar course. You can see here that if you click, for example, if you click on one of these blog posts on the left, that blog opens up right here in our Netvibes page. You can close it up and click on one of the wiki pages that have been updated, and it opens a portal to the wiki right here in the Netvibes page. So everything's you can get to everything right here. To conclude, even at this relatively late date, I still find my colleagues apprehensive about that great, gray, unsettling box of technology that passes before their eyes like a shadow when one raises the possibility of distance learning. They can recite in a moment a list of teaching and learning goods that they fear will be lost in distance learning's mysterious, pedagogically desolate, Mordor-like landscape. My hope is that those fears might be addressed, not simply head-on, hey, let's all do distance learning, but also obliquely, as traditional educators find themselves moved to accept the gifts of distance learning in the teaching spaces where they already are, and thereby increase the possibilities for learning in our brick-and-mortar classrooms. If you go to my blog, anuma.com, and click on the tab called Educators, there you will find a link to a list of the resources that I talk about in this presentation so that you can investigate them yourself more closely if you wish. Thank you very much for listening to this presentation. This has been Brooke Lester.